All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jill Liskey. I am the Administrator of Services for Service Coordination with the Division. We are happy to have everybody joining us today for our Q3 provider and division meeting here. So thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedules. If everyone else's work is like all of ours, I wish them all like the Energizer Bunny batteries, because I think we're all just running around crazy, and I'm sure you guys are as well. But thank you for joining us today. We have a pretty exciting agenda. So we'll go ahead and show that here. Let's see. We will hear from our deputy directors, see if they have some updates for all of us. We'll get an Olmsted update from Bernie and some waiver amendment updates. We have Joni giving us some ICAP information. I'll have a little bit of discussion on some service coordination topics. And then we also have some guest speakers from Liberty doing a presentation on some of the changes with the things that they're working on, that Liberty is working on with the division. And then we'll have time at the end for some open discussion and questions. So with that, actually, before we jump into our agenda, just a few housekeeping things. I did go ahead and mute everybody on entry and just mute as you're in, just so that way as our speakers are talking about their information, it can avoid all the background noise. But feel free, if you have a question for folks, to unmute and ask your question verbally, or you're certainly welcome to use the chat function on the right side of your screen if you want to put your question in there. We are recording this today, and so we will post it on our public website along with the slide deck as well, for folks to have that to reference, either something that they heard and wanted to clarify, or for folks within your agencies that weren't able to make it today, you can share the link and share the information with them as well. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I didn't double check to make sure all of our great leaders are on. Let's see. Joe, are you on yet?
Yeah, I'm here, Jill.
Okay, great. Do you want to go ahead and give any updates that you have from your area?
I certainly will. Greetings, everyone. The only update I have for today is regarding our audit reports that are required for our agency providers per our 404 regulations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, around October 2020, sometime in October, we granted a temporary six-month extension to providers to submit their independent financial audits that are prepared by a licensed CPA, with consideration of the CPAs not being able to do their on-site reviews during that time. Since the situation has changed, I sent out communication to the provider listserv today, indicating that that 6-month extension is going to go away July 31st. So effective August 1st, we'll fall back to our existing regulations, and providers will be expected to complete those audit reports within 180 days of the end of their fiscal year. And that is the only update I have.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe.
You bet.
Jennifer Perkins, are you available and on? Curtis, do you want to go ahead and give your updates?
I will, absolutely.
Awesome.
First, good afternoon,
Thank
everybody. Nice to see everybody, and this is a very exciting platform. I'm anxious to hear the rest of the material as well. I will get my part over briefly and quickly so we can move on to some other good stuff. Just, again, as we move through our transition and making the changes and working towards our HCBS goals and trying to get in alignment with our expectations on how we serve people, again, be shifting and making some adjustments. We've started already having the dialogues about person-centered planning, and now we're getting to the time where we're going to be getting into some process development issues. And one of the things that we've decided to do is really look at charting the life course. The difference is, person-centered planning is a philosophical approach to how people are served. And charting the life course is actually a tool and a method or a direction in which to take that. So it gives some very concrete information, and how do we blend that information into our current ISP process and what we'll name. But the thing is, we've got Mark Friedman coming back as well in the early stages, and he'll also be doing some reach out for that. And we'll be getting support along the way. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So again, we just want to make improvements as we can and make sure that we're comfortable and aware and moving on a very comfortable timeline. I've really enjoyed getting out to see the offices and meet some of the service coordinators out there. That part is not over, but that's been very invigorating to me, and I appreciate the welcoming support. I've gotten out to see some of the provider sites, and they've been welcoming and willing to give me information about where they are and what it's been like over the past year. I've really enjoyed that, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity and the information that I've been provided. And that's my thing.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Curtis. Jennifer, were you able to join us? Okay, I think she probably got caught in another meeting. So we'll just go ahead and move down to Bernie. When Jennifer joins us, we'll go ahead and have her give any updates that she has. So Bernie.
Well, thank you, Jillian. And I want to first of all introduce myself. I know I'm recognizing lots and lots of names in the participant list. For folks who may recall, my name is Bernie Haskell, and I had worked for the Division of Developmental Disability a few years ago when we first started working on kind of assessing to see how we were doing with the original kind of language around the final rule. So it's been kind of exciting to step away, but then come back and see all the work that's happened over the last several years. So it's very cool. Part of my role when I come in, part of my role when I joined the division as a policy administrator was that I was able to step into leading the Olmstead efforts. Many of you are probably familiar with Heather Lashinsky. Heather had done that role for the division for the last couple of years. Heather, much to our chagrin, has left to go pursue a different opportunity outside of Health and Human Services, and we wish her lots and lots of success that way, but I also know I have some fairly large shoes to fill with the Olmstead work. So I don't know, there's not a lot of great information that I can share with you right now because I've just kind of stepped into this recently, but we do have an upcoming advisory committee meeting on July 22nd. And we're going to review the plan, strategies, objectives, and outcomes. One of the things that I think it would be maybe meaningful for folks to understand, the way that original Olmstead plan was written, it's a nice plan. It was really hard to have there weren't a lot of measurable metrics on the plan. So it was really hard to kind of get a good pulse for how we were doing. When I say we, I mean globally as the state of Nebraska. And so we're going back and looking at those overarching outcomes. And so those outcomes that were agreed upon are not changing. However, the kind of the strategies and things that we're doing to try to move towards those outcomes, we're working to put those into SMART goal formats. So we'll be able to do some dashboarding and those types of things to have a better reflection of the work that's being done. So that's just a little bit about the work that group will be taking on. There are work groups. It says they're forming. These are groups that I don't think were ever done. So folks, please, if you're interested in any aspect of the Olmstead work, if you want to reach out to me, you are more than welcome to join any of the work groups. Currently, we have one looking at housing, one looking at education and employment, and one looking more globally at data issues. And that data issues is somewhat really not focused on individual entities, but how do all of our entities that work together, how does our data jive? How can we look across systems, across providers, across folks? And that's a big lift, and that's like a 2 to 3 year plan. So more to come on that. And then the Olmstead page on the DHS website is updated regularly. So if you subscribe to that, you'll get, anytime we upload meeting notes, those types of things, you will definitely get an alert to go in and check that. So that's what I have as far as Olmstead updates. But I will be back around this afternoon when it's time for open questions, and I'll be more than happy to entertain questions at that time. All right, it looks like I'm next to talk about the DD waiver amendments. So if you would click to the next slide, please, Joe. So we sent our DD waiver amendments to CMS on June 30th. I anticipate, I'd love to say the end of July, but I think it'll be closer to probably mid-August before we'll get any feedback from CMS on those waiver amendments. But that's not to be confused with the waiver renewal, which is also in process right now. So being kind of new, coming back to developmental disabilities, it's been a little bit of a learning curve because we've got kind of lots of things going on at the same time. But those waiver amendments, those are ones that have gone out for public comment. People have seen those. As we're working on the DD waiver renewals, which will we want to have completed by the end of the year, we will have lots of opportunities moving forward for interested stakeholders to come together. And the goal is to have that actually prior to public comment so that we can incorporate that feedback and input before we put something out. I think that's probably a better approach to that. That will help influence how we write those that waiver renewal to begin with, so that when we get to public comment, it's not the first time people are seeing it, and especially if we've missed something that was really impactful to somebody, we want to make sure that we get that in prior to public comment. And then just really quickly, the AD waiver renewal, we had sent that in, I want to say beginning of June as well, or no, I'll take that back. That went in prior. We did receive a request for additional information on June 18th. We responded on July 7th. We actually got another one request for additional information, Wednesday, on Monday. And so we are working to pull that information together to forward that up to CMS as well. And so that's the information that I have currently on the waiver renewals, waiver amendments. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernie.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, please.
So the public comments for the waiver amendments, are they posted somewhere? I never saw them posted.
They are. Well, now that I say that they are, I know that was directed to be posted, and I had conversations that they were. If you go to the DD website, there's a piece where it talks about the renewals, and then the public comments are underneath that. So I will confirm while we're in this meeting. I'll pull it up to make sure that they're there, and I'll put a link in the chat.
I think the renewals are. I'm talking about the waiver amendment, public comments. I never saw them.
I will. Okay, so when you say the amendment, the renewals for A and D, or renewal for the DD?
DD.
Okay, the comments for the DD, I'll have to make sure that the original public comments have been posted. I believe that they have for the amendments, but the public comments for the renewal haven't been gathered yet. So we haven't had the official public comments for the DD renewal. Did that answer the question, or did I make it more confusing?
No, I get you. I never saw the DD waiver amendment public comments ever being posted.
Okay, I will double check and look on our website and make sure they're there so that I can put that in the chat box. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bernie, this is Karen Kavanaugh. I had a question. It's been a while. Can you remind us again what the major waiver amendments are?
I'm sorry, Karen, I was distracted during your question. I will take ownership over that. I apologize. Could you give me that question again?
Oh, that's okay. It's just things are slow and complicated with, pieces of waivers going back and forth. So I asked if you would remind me, please, what the major pieces of the waiver amendments are.
Karen, I would love to do that, but I don't feel confident in my ability to do those efficiently at this meeting. So that is something that I can pull together. I know there were some one-pagers that were put together that had kind of high level what those changes were. And so I'll put the link in the chat on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry I wasn't more help today.
We'll give you some grace, Bernie. You're new in your position, so.
I will take all the grace that I can get.
Mhm. All right, thank you, Bernie. Thanks, folks, for unmuting and asking questions too. I appreciate that. Miss Joni, are you ready to go, ma'am?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joni Gebhard, and I am the program manager for the OAP process with the division, and I oversee the completion of the biennial ICAPs. We recently had a couple of provider trainings in April and June, and I believe a lot of you were able to attend that training. So I hope that was helpful to you, and that reminds me that I don't believe that we have put the PowerPoint, the presentation on the website yet. So I will do some work on that so that is available to you. So today I want to go over just a couple of new things and maybe just a reiteration of some of the things that we talked about in the training. First of all, biennial ICAPs, the interview scheduling. The scheduling is to be completed with the ICAP agency liaison. Each of you should have an appointed liaison, and we do try to keep that list updated as changes occur. So again, if your liaisons change or something different happens, be sure and let me know about those changes so I can share those with staff completing the ICAPs. We have to reach out to the liaison via ESCOM because we are sharing private health information regarding those assessments for participants. So we will be reaching out to you via ESCOM on TheraUp. So please make sure that all of your liaisons have access to TheraUp. I do want to say also that we need and value the input from the agency liaisons. You are a crucial part of our process and making sure that we reach out to the appropriate interviewees. And that helps us get that important information that we need from the people who know the individual, the participant best. However, we've been having some issues in our reach outs and getting responses. So this is something new. We're going to ask that the liaisons respond to the CCSs and DSSs within 5 days of the reach out about the interviews. We have some cases where liaisons are great, get back to us right away, but we've also had some instances where we've had to wait 2 or 3 weeks for responses, and we just can't do that in order to keep the ICAP process moving along and get those 3,000 ICAPs done that we need to get done this year. So if you would, please respond as quickly as you can within 5 days when you get a reach out. If the liaison does not respond within 5 days, we're going to have to proceed, and the DHHS staff will determine who to interview by discussing the case with the service coordinator and the legal guardian if applicable. Again, the ICAP agency liaison is responsible for scheduling the ICAP interviews with agency staff. So again, my hope is that we can work with you and get those appropriate names of interviewees, and then the liaison will schedule that interview for our staff. Methods of completing the ICAP interview. Right now, video conference is going to be our preferred method of doing those interviews, both with families and with staff. So right now we use WebEx, so that will be probably the system that we will be using. We do have to ensure that it is a secured form of communication. So if we use another form of communication, that may need to be approved by me or the staff supervisor. Families, interviewees may go to the local DHHS office to participate in video conferencing if necessary, if they're unable to access video conferencing. Then, as needed, interviews may be conducted in person. Of course, we want to be family friendly, person-centered. So if we have some individuals that it works better for them to do that interview in person on a case-by-case basis, we'll look at that and certainly respond to those needs. Interviews may also be conducted by phone as needed. Again, looking at each situation case by case and what's going to work best. If we need to conduct those by phone, we will also do that method. Next, I just wanted to reiterate the role of documentation in our process. We talked about that at training. Jill, can you move the slide forward? Thank you. Documentation, of course, plays an important role. We look at provider assessments, we look at your behavior tracking, safety plans, behavior support plans, and documentation does serve as our evidence in the final scoring of the ICAP, especially if the interviewees are disagreeing on their responses. It's crucial that we're able to locate your provider assessments if completed. And again, we generally look on the individual homepage in your provider account under assessments. So if you could put them there, that would be awesome. We'll be able to find those. Again, we rely heavily on the GERs, the T-logs, behavior tracking, when we determine the frequency of behavior. So it's crucial that staff are documenting the frequency of behaviors as they occur as directed by the team. And of course, remember that when there is evidence of an FBA and a BSP, the behavior may be rated higher in severity. So those are all issues that we look at. We've had some appeals lately, particularly with shared living providers, and they are saying that they are unaware that they need to document that information. So I just wanted to share that reminder so you can share that with your SLPs, and so that service coordination can keep that in mind too during team meetings, that if a behavior is of high priority, it's something that needs to be addressed. We're going to be looking for those FBAs and BSPs to be in place. Any questions about that information?
I had a question. I got a response from an ICAP person today saying that they were kind of putting them on hold because there was a new assessment coming out. They had reached out to me for the staff's name, and then when I got it to them, now they're holding scheduling it.
Okay, I'm not sure why that might be. I probably would need a little bit more information. If you want to send me an email or something, we can sure look at that.
Sure.
I know we have some situations where people are just kind of starting back to day services, and you know, if we can, we want to wait and be able to get information from that day service staff. But again, we have approximately 3,000 ICAPs needing to be completed in 2021. So sometimes we just have to forge ahead. So I don't know if she might have received some information about services restarting or a change in provider or whatever, but
It
if you
sounded
want
like something on, yeah, I'll shoot you an email. It sounded like something on your guys' end, like a new assessment that was coming out that they needed to work on versus a client assessment. But I will forward it to you so you can kind of see it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, if you would forward that to me, that would be great. And I'll get back to you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Joni. I know I have gotten a note just from one provider struggling with sound. I'm hoping everybody else's sound is okay. I wish I had some better tips for troubleshooting sound issues. I am hoping it's better for you guys, but I apologize if for some reason it's cutting in and out. We just had a couple discussion points that we wanted to go over from service coordination. One of the things we wanted to talk just a little bit about is our participant transitions. We're trying to do a little bit better of a job being proactive and setting up providers and participants in success in these transitions, especially for some of our folks who have a bit more behaviors and traditionally have been difficult to support. We are engaging our clinical team a bit more. We're reaching out to providers when folks have maybe received a termination or we're looking for a new agency. So in that transition and when we're looking for a new agency, you might get questions like what will be your proposal to support this person, or can we see what your programming or your BSP or your safety plans would look like first. And so we've already been doing this, but I just wanted to make sure to sort of just point this out. So if it might be an odd request for some of you, it might not be something that we have asked for in the past when you're looking at accepting a referral or supporting somebody that has some higher behavioral needs. I just wanted to let folks know that we're just doing this to better set up you for success and better set up the participant for success in that transition. So if you've seen some of that, that's kind of the why behind that. Any questions on that? I know feels like lately we've had a lot of internal meetings just on some of the folks that we're supporting that we're really struggling with. And I know providers and Director Green spoke about this too the other day on our stakeholder call. You guys are really struggling with staffing. So I think there's just a lot of things that are going into play with some of the folks that we're trying to support. And so we're seeing notices coming in, and thank you to the providers who are stepping up when we're calling and begging, I think. And thank you to Jesse and the clinical team who have done a tremendous job in trying to build relationships with some of you risk providers to also continue to support some of these difficult folks. But any questions or comments on that? We recognize, again, with the staff shortage, asking folks to support participants who have enhanced supervision, it's a big ask. And we really, again, appreciate the partnership. Any questions or comments on that? Has it been helpful for those agencies where we have done that and we have asked for those proposals? And maybe I can think of an example when we started to do this a couple months ago, the provider submitted a proposal and it was a good proposal, but we had some additional suggestions. And so then our clinical team did some additional training to help provide some additional support to that agency. That agency was really appreciative and that person transitioned really well. It really was a good scenario, which is kind of what got us thinking we should do this for more folks. Any thoughts, comments? Okay. The second thing I wanted to talk about is so we, like you probably get a lot of reach outs from family members, guardians, folks in the community who are concerned or want services on our developmental disability waivers or our age and disabled waiver. And so one of the things we hear, I have the delightful pleasure of sitting by Kathy. And so I hear on the phone a lot of times with folks who are calling in about eligibility. And one of the things that we're hearing from families when they call us is, well, I spoke with this provider and they said just to call you guys and you'll give us services. now I'm confident that's not exactly what you guys are saying, right? We know that. But I do think that in your best attempts to try to help educate the family, sometimes maybe we've changed some of our practices, or families interpret some of the things that maybe folks are saying to be, as soon as they make that call, we'll have services available. And so if you are getting reach outs from community members about our services, there's a lot of information on the website that can be helpful. It walks folks through on how to apply, what our statute is and the requirements for eligibility for both our or all of our waivers. And so feel free to direct them there. You can also make sure that they're welcome to call us. In fact, we would love to answer their questions. There isn't any changes in our DD eligibility process. And so, you know, again, just having people contact our office and start that first piece if they're interested in services with ensuring that they are eligible. But for our age and disabled waiver, the eligibility process for those who are ages 4 to 18 has not changed. And I can put in the chat box here in a minute when I'm done talking, because I'm not good at multitasking when I'm talking anyways. I'll put in the chat box the email address that folks can send their question to, or the application to, or information about AD eligibility, or they can also call our 800 number and we can help support them as well. I feel like somebody may be unmuted. I can't see anybody but like 2 people. So did somebody have a question?
Yeah, Jillian, this is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. Hey, I don't know if we've been sending people up your way or not. It used to be we sent people towards service coordination. Do you want them to be directed to the central office or to service coordination?
You know,
and if to the central office, is there a specific person?
I think starting with our 800 number, somebody in my division or our division could tell me differently, but starting with our 800 number is good, because then if there is specific questions, sometimes, so reaching out to service coordination, we're helpful people. We always want to help. That's not a bad option. But what does happen sometimes is because we are boots on the ground and we're just ready to like help people get services right away. And our local staff then just kind of start with that and forget that we want to make sure to go through eligibility. And then we sometimes spend a lot of time talking to families about these services that they're not even eligible for. And so really having them go through that front door is really important first. And so I think going through our central office, the 800 number is fine. Again, when I get, so sometimes those calls are triaged and they're sent to myself, they go to Kathy, they go to a lot of people in the division. A lot of times I'm just walking a person online on our public website through kind of where it says what is required for eligibility and then the application process. And that is not a little bit more than half the time all that they need is to be able to see that and answer some of those questions. So you can also direct people to our public website, Karen, that might be helpful as well.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people want to talk it through though, and that's fine. And so I think sending it to our 800 number is fine, and then we'll triage from there.
All right. Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And again, we appreciate all of you providers for trying to help answer the questions. And again, you know, certainly can continue to do what you would like to do, but we do sense some frustration from families and when they call and they are assuming that they're going to get services right away, and what they are reporting to us is what they feel like they heard from the agency was that they just had to make that call and we would send somebody out and they would start having services. And again, we acknowledge it's likely not what you're saying, but that is what they're reporting to us. Let's see, the third reminder on here, I just wanted to put a tiny little plug out there for service coordination. We're hearing still some situations where participants have moved to a new shared living provider home or a new group home, and we were not notified, so we couldn't go out and do that initial on-site visit. That's a really important visit that we want to do. We want to make sure that that environment is suitable to meet the participants' needs. I'm sure that you've done your own double checks as well, but it's really important for us as a service coordinator in ensuring that that person's plan can also then be implemented in that same environment that we're notified. Recognize that there are going to be emergency situations where you're going to need to act and move them like right away, right? Before we can get out there, it might be a Saturday night and we're not here. We understand that those emergency situations will occur, but as soon as the emergency ends and the person is safe, please call us as quickly as you can so that we can get out. I have been so pleased with so many of our service coordination teammates. We will have this scenario where, because many of you providers serve people people in different areas, and people will make emergency moves. And we've got people from our out west area doing a very quick visit to ensure that the environment is okay for somebody who's moving from Omaha, and our folks are dropping what they can in the moment to make that happen. So thank you to service coordination folks who are on. We really appreciate that. But I know that sometimes what we hear providers will say, well, we were going to move them that next day. We didn't figure service coordination could get out right away. Let us worry about that. We'll do our best to get somebody out as quickly as we can, but that is a requirement. We do need to make sure that you've notified us so that we can do that visit. Any questions on that? Okay, provider capacity intakes and referrals. So this is a discussion point that we had a couple weeks back. Service coordination, as Director Green has talked about, we're looking at making some more offers. And I know he spoke about the staffing shortage as well the other day, but when we are connecting, when families get the very exciting news that they have a funding offer that they've been waiting a really long time for, and I'm sure it's really hard for you providers to not be able to provide that service right away too. You're in the same boat we are. But what we're hearing from families is they'll reach out to an agency and the agency will say, yeah, no problem, we can serve you. And then they're waiting a long time. And again, we all recognize the barriers, but what the family heard is, yep, we can do it, we can support you. And then that agency after, a couple of weeks is the communication changes to, we don't have staff right now, or there's some other, people who have some higher needs. And so we will certainly do our best to support you, but it won't occur right away. And again, we understand the reality is that does happen, but if you could really work with us on being as transparent as you can be to families, and many of you agencies are doing that, but not all of you, because I think it's just discouraging what we're hearing from families is that, they are excited, they make that connection, the provider promises them services right away, and they would have maybe moved on and called another agency if they knew they had to wait 6 months for services. And again, perhaps that next agency wouldn't be able to do it either, but we're just asking if you can really partner with us on being as transparent as you can with families when they call you for services. So then that way, if you aren't able to provide that support right away, we can do our best to support them in finding an agency that can, again, recognizing that this is a struggle that all of you and all of us are having together. And then the last topic that I had was, we're trying to do our best on our end to make sure that staff, when they go to ISP meetings, are familiar with the person. We have vacancies just like you guys do, and we're working to build them up and have them knowledgeable and prepared for all meetings that they're going to. And I know that there's times when it's a newer staff and they might not have all the answers. And so we appreciate all the providers' patience and certainly our family's patience too, when maybe we have to get back to folks on answers. But if you could please try to do that very same thing on your end. We know you have vacancies and you have new staff as well, but there are times when we're hearing that folks who are sitting in ISP meetings, maybe they didn't even know the person. They're sitting in last minute because the other person wasn't available. And so here we have the provider representation as someone that doesn't know that person very well and isn't super familiar with our HCBS services. And so it makes it really difficult. I think then that meeting shifts from focusing on the person and focusing on what their plan and what they want. And it really kind of shifts to a lot of education about services in general. And we really want our focus at our participants' meetings to be about them and their services and their delivery. So if you could just help us with that, we would really appreciate it. Those were all the topics that I had. Any questions that you guys have for me on something I talked about, or just service coordination in general?
Yes, I do. This is Alfredo with Home at Last.
Hi, Alfredo.
And I want to, hi. So you guys do a fantastic job with getting those initial self-assessments completed before we start services. Well, what we're seeing is that we prepare a house for participant A to move in, and then we try to answer those questions beforehand, before they actually are in services, what specific questions you guys are asking for that client. And then something falls through and participant B goes into that house instead. So now we have to change the assessments and answer questions based on that for that participant. That slows the process down for us as an agency with us. I would like to propose that we do those in stages. Maybe we do the house assessment to make sure that the basics are in order, And 30 days after the client moves in, then answer those specific questions and remedy anything after that.
Mm-hmm.
Because having to do that advance is slowing down intake.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that feedback, Alfredo. And I think for folks who don't have maybe some of those enhanced needs, hopefully that isn't happening as much, right? I mean, I think our process that we've used for referrals has been working. That we haven't had to do as much of that pre-assessment and kind of pre-vetting, maybe, if that's the right terminology, of those plans. And so I hope it's not that. I hope it's not folks who I can't talk today. I'm sorry. It's a Wednesday. Folks who do not have sort of enhanced behaviors. Is that the group that you're talking about, or are you talking about other participants that we're supporting?
Yes. So I'm actually referring to individual homes before services can start.
Okay.
Self-assessment has to be completed. And
The site
I believe
assessment.
it's the site assessment, yes.
Okay.
And I believe it used to be Katie's department that
Okay.
required 15 days and come back for fully compliant or not compliant.
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
that's the assessment I'm referring to.
Oh, okay.
We are getting different reasons for the same questions that your department or the department is saying we should answer to. And we're like, well, we answered this for the 10 others this way with this basic question. Now it's being held up because the 11th one is the same, but not enough. And it's pertaining to the individual client that's going into that we are really still getting to know. So we can't really answer the questions in great detail like the surveyors are asking us to until the client is in services.
Okay.
So that's causing a problem for us to try to guess that the client that we're getting in services for the first time need until we actually get them in.
Sure.
And your question in the intake meeting are specifically about those clients that we're still getting to know too. So
Sure.
you're asking us to answer questions in advance in hopes that we're answering them correctly for them since we don't know them yet.
Sure. Yeah, so I
You
think
can allow them to come in and then give us 2 weeks to then find out on them in particular to answer those questions.
sure.
Jillian, I can answer to some of that.
That'd be great. Thanks, Katie.
This is Katie Widener, the Quality Assurance Administrator, and I know that 99% of you I know, but for those that I don't know, I'm happy to meet you. So Alfredo, yes, it still falls under within my unit. Ashley Knutson is the supervisor over that team that does that evaluates those assessments. I hear what you're saying, and we're actually in the process of relooking at those assessments and how we're conducting those, and the basic, going back to the basic purpose of what those are for, across all assessment types, not just the self-assessments, but the on-sites as well. And making sure that everyone is answering the questions the same way and responding to those questions the same way. But I will take note of that feedback about those questions that are more specific to participants, and we'll go back to the direction from CMS to see if there is something that if there's leeway in there as far as when those can be assessed, because you are not the first person to give that feedback. That it's really difficult to do those self-assessments when you don't really know the participant very well. So I'm going to take note of that, and we're actually right now in the process of really digging into that a little bit deeper. So I am hoping that once we're done with that, that will help eliminate or alleviate some of those concerns that we've heard.
Thank you so very much.
Katie.
Katie, this is Bev Mayfield. I appreciate you looking at it. Yes, we have concerns that we were fully compliant. I don't see that the state transition plan or final rule has changed, but then now we're not compliant, and so there's a lot of confusion on
Yes,
what's happening there.
thank you, Bev. Yes, we are aware that there's been some question about some of that. And I will say that doing, virtual visits versus in-person visits can sometimes lead to different results, but we are taking a look at that across the board to make sure that we're doing good inter-rater reliability and making sure that everyone has the same interpretations of the questions when they're doing those responses. So we are taking a very deep dive into that, even starting here in the next couple of days.
Katie, this is Karen Kavanaugh. I had a question. So when you're looking at that, does the CMS guidance talk about that you have to answer those questions specific to a person? Because I guess I was thinking that they were more specific to the site, and if a site would be acceptable for a person with a disability.
Right.
Yeah, so it's some of the questions on the self-assessments are a little bit more person-based as opposed to setting-based, but they're not necessarily directly about the specific person that's going to live there, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Okay. So you're taking a look at that. Okay, I appreciate it. That's
Yes.
enough for me.
Yes, we are.
Thank
Sorry,
you very much.
didn't mean to
No,
take over the
Katie,
meeting.
I appreciate that. It is certainly, you are the expert. So thank you very much for jumping in. And actually, it's great timing, and we'll have time at the end. We hope for some additional questions. So Katie, if you want to go ahead and take it over from here. I don't know, do you want me to give you the, so you can do the slides? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I'm next on the agenda. So like Julian said, that's perfect timing. And I am very happy to introduce Daryl Milner, who is the Executive Director for Liberty Healthcare in Nebraska. I don't know if Kate is on as well. Is she on? I didn't see her.
I believe so.
Okay. And okay, great. Also, I would like to introduce Kate Obert, who is, Kate, I'm not sure what your title is exactly.
I'm the contract administrator.
The contract administrator for Liberty Healthcare as well. Thank you, Kate. And they have agreed to join us today to discuss, kind of give an overview of who they are, and also discuss the upcoming plans as it relates to mortality review and the mortality review committee for folks who are served by our DD waivers, as well as our HGen disabled waiver, our traumatic brain injury waiver, and those folks that are served at BSDC. So I will give this over to Kate or Daryl. I'm not sure who's presenting, but I can go ahead and run the slides for you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Good afternoon. My name is Kate Obert, and I work for Liberty Healthcare. Liberty began work with the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Developmental Disabilities in January of 2020. And really, as we're coming in, we're looking at collaborating around some of the key initiatives that they have, such as creating integrated services and establishing and enhancing collaborative relationships. Can you go to the next slide? Katie?
Yeah, I will. You are cutting in and out. I don't know if you maybe need to turn your video off or something, because it's
Okay,
pretty
let me
choppy.
try that. Sorry. Is that better? Is that a little bit better?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's
Okay,
much
sorry
better.
about that. So Liberty coming in is really pairing around the 2021 initiatives from the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Developmental Disabilities, and really looking at their key initiatives, such as creating an integrated service delivery system and establishing and enhancing collaborative relationships. To improve, we can go to the next slide. Actually, the next one as well. So to improve Nebraska's service delivery system, which is one of the key initiatives that they have, the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Developmental Disabilities secured a QIO or QIO-like entity, which is a quality improvement organization entity. And really what they wanted the QIO-like entity to do in the state of Nebraska was to help look at collecting, aggregating, and looking at performance measure data and providing recommendations to improve the overall quality of service that it provides to its individuals and services, to use valid quality data to transform that information into practical recommendations for performance improvement, and to configure a quality improvement data system, which is referred to as QUIDS, to meet the needs of the home and community-based waivers and provide a reliable mechanism for capturing relevant information. Liberty Healthcare has been around for more than 30 years, and Liberty has really worked with multiple state agencies to design, improve, and implement policies and procedures that govern the delivery of Medicaid waiver services and help develop tools to track effectiveness and drive continuous quality improvement. The areas of expertise that Liberty is in more than 15 states and really works in 5 major areas, including behavioral health, intellectual developmental disabilities, which is its largest areas, aging and disability support services, correctional mental health services, and sex offender management services. We have previously done some work in the state in other areas. So we have been a known entity to DHHS, DDD, and have worked around some of the ICF work previously in the state. What a quality improvement organization or QIO-like entity does, really the goal of the work in any state is to improve the overall effectiveness and efficiency and quality of services delivered and increasing overall satisfaction of the individual served, and help develop a work plan for the program to help really support integrity, accuracy, and reliability, and its quality activities. And so when they secured the contract, basically we came in and really started looking at quality overall and really developing a relationship with the state. And so we've been here about 7 months working with the different divisions within Nebraska. We do have a local on-site team, and I will actually let Daryl talk about the Nebraska team as he has a more local presence there.
Great, thanks, Kate. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daryl Milner, and I'm the Executive Director for the Nebraska team at Liberty. How's my voice? Is it chopping up? I have my video on. I'll just leave it on if you guys can hear me. I'm getting a thumbs up. All right. I'm very excited to be a part of this team. I come from the Department of Human Services in the state of South Dakota for the last 13 years or so, serving in various leadership roles with that department, including serving as the director of the Division of Developmental Disabilities for the state. So I'm very happy to be here. And just as happy to introduce all of you to the Liberty team. As you see here, it's always nice to put a face to the name. Over the course of our partnership with DDD, you'll likely come across these names from time to time. So you have a picture here. Before we leave this slide, though, I do just want to point out the expertise of the team. We have Dr. Zwick, who is a MD. He will sit on the mortality review committee and really take a close look at those unexplained, unexpected deaths, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later on in the presentation. We also have 2 registered nurses who sit on our team. They will be a part of not only the initial triage of mortality reviews, but also they will be involved as they progress through the review process and into the mortality review committee and remediation if so need be. And then lastly, I wanted to point out our data analyst and solutions manager. Kate mentioned the QUIDS system, which will house the data around mortality incidents and our reviews. And the QUIDS system houses that data. So that's our team. We do have a local presence, as Kate said, and we're happy to be here. Next slide, please. So I just want to briefly kind of walk through what Liberty Healthcare in Nebraska will be doing. Kate mentioned we came in January, and over the last 6 months, we've been reviewing current procedures and practices with the intent to get that baseline understanding so we're able to recommend best practices built around quality frameworks. Again, I mentioned the QUID system, which will house all of the review data that we are ingesting through our review process. We've partnered with an organization called the Rushmore Group, who is a market leader in quality data management systems. They're developing and maintaining the QUID system at our behalf, and they're working to configure mortality review module, case file review module, and a critical incident module built around those best practices. Liberty, the Liberty Nebraska team will operationally take over mortality reviews beginning in August, and then as the waiver is approved through the renewal process, we will kick off other modules in March of next year. Next slide, please. So I spoke about gaining an understanding of that baseline process and procedures around mortality reviews, and then using that baseline to transition us into a quality framework built around best practices. And so this slide really lays out what that best practice quality framework looks like for mortality reviews and what it will look like once Liberty takes over the mortality review process. So I'll briefly go through this. There's more information that the division is planning to share, and I believe post on their website, which will go into greater detail for you. But Liberty will obtain data through state systems, Therap Connect, where that mortality information is housed, as well as through a death notification form. So we'll begin by acquiring the demographic information about the participant, medical history, and days, weeks, and events leading up to the death. We'll initiate our mortality review, and for those reviews that are deemed or labeled unexplained or unanticipated, we'll go through a secondary review process through the mortality review committee. All mortality reviews are tracked and trended, and findings and recommendations from the MRC in conjunction with the division are then determined and presented to the applicable provider. And next slide. Kate and I also mentioned we have a local presence in Lincoln, phone number, email, and our local office in the event you need to make contact with the Liberty team.
Katie, do you want me to go through some of the changes, or would you like to do that?
You can go ahead.
Looking at the last 6 months of doing a recommendation and reviewing the mortality process in an effort to create consistency across the waivers and to help reduce some redundancy and to also align with best practices, there was some recommendations made, and 5 of them are listed here that will be, I understand, posted for public comment. Is that correct, Katie?
I don't know if it's a public comment necessarily. I'm not entirely sure though exactly what it is, but it's not a formal public comment, I don't believe.
Okay, so some of the changes that were posted, like I said, to create consistency or further reduce some redundancy going on with some of the forms and data entry to system or align with best practice include using an updated death notification form. I know it's referred to as notification of death form now. So there will be an enhanced death notification form that will be streamlined across waivers. And I believe my understanding is that would be posted for people to view on the website, so you can see what that form looks like. It's going to be streamlined across all waivers, and additional change to the death notification form process is to try and house a consistent capture of the death notification form into one electronic system. And for that reason, I think the recommendation is not to mail or physically fax the death notification forms, and really for a few reasons: to have it all housed in one place to help with HIPAA compliance overall, and to ensure timely processing of that death notification form. So the electronic submission, I think, can help with all of those things, and as a recommendation. And going forward, those would be issued into the mailbox you see listed below, nebraska.quality.health@libertyhealth.com. And so it's just one smooth process with one aligned form across waivers to make the process a little simpler and a little more consistent. In the next slide, one of the other recommendations, as Liberty completes its mortality reviews, we will possibly be sending a checklist to providers asking for additional documentation if that documentation cannot be housed or found in other places, including THRAP or other state agencies. And so what I guess we're asking for providers' assistance is or acknowledgement of is, you may receive an email from us. We are an extension of DDD. We do have state email addresses, but we do have a Liberty logo that kind of differentiates that we're Liberty staff. But really, it's just an effort to help make sure that we have the required documentation for a thorough mortality review for our MRTT team, and then for the mortality review committee. So we're looking at all of the applicable documentation and making sure that we fully understand the occurrence, and in order to help improve any outcomes or make recommendations to the mortality committee, or for them to kind of help look at that documentation in general to see if there's other recommendations per each individual case. So just if you see an email, just know that it's from Liberty in the future going forward on August 1st. Another additional change is for all death of person incidents. When we do send that additional request, we usually do it within 3 days of receiving the death of person incident from the state. And then we're just asking providers turn that around in 20 calendar days so that we can have a timely investigation if at all possible. You may see an email come from us requesting that. If we may not able to, you may not be able to get it to us within 20 days, we may send a second request to receive it within 30 days. And again, it's just to help with that, the investigation and the mortality review. And the last recommendation on the next slide is, regardless of what type of mortality review you do, we want to close the loop with everybody. And for that intent, as we close out our mortality review process overall, you will either receive a closure letter or a closure letter from Liberty saying there's some recommendations from our mortality review triage team or for the MRC committee itself. And it may have some just best practice recommendations. And this is really just to help enhance provider capacity, share best practices, and just overall kind of build capacity. So it's really just an effort to improve quality for individuals, to help providers, and to kind of, again, share best practices. And so we don't necessarily need to do anything with the letters, but when you do receive them, it's just notification that we have closed out that mortality review, and you know, either it does or does not have any further recommendations. And so these are all process changes that we recommended to move forward on 8-1. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback, definitely wanting to receive those so that we can help work through this process.
I have a couple of questions. One, will you be asking for information that we would have within our agency, or are you also going to be asking for information that we would not have on hand within our agency, such as autopsy reports?
we'll probably be asking for as much documentation as we can get in hopes that you can help us secure it. And then we're also going to be doing some due diligence to try and secure it through other means. And so it's really just a collective effort to get as much information around those topics as possible. And we realize that sometimes providers and those supporting individuals may not have all those documents. So another recommendation we had made was to sort of do a root cause analysis on what are the barriers to getting some of that key documentation. And so we may be conducting that down the road soon as well to kind of see, you know, if we need critical documentation, why are people not able to access it? Is there anything we can do to impact that outcome?
Okay, thanks. My other question was, you said you're going to be sending out recommendations, but there were also, I believe there was something about quality monitoring follow-up. So are those going to be, those recommendations, are we going to be expected to accept those recommendations and implement?
That's a decision probably DDD would need to make, but I assume down the road, there will probably be a discussion if they go out and just in the form of technical assistance, mostly for around quality. I don't know if there's any formal monitoring action around that at this point, other than there's recommendations if you want to use it. It's at your disposal. And then also when we send the letters, if you want to engage and find out more, we're available if you want to access us for technical assistance, especially working with our clinical team, if there's things you want to find more out just to enhance your overall quality. So I think that slide is more speaking to, you know, just the overall quality outcomes in general. If you want more technical assistance or need more technical assistance, it's there for your disposal. Not that it's remediation or a citation or anything of that nature, but I think it's just how can we help each other enhance best practice.
That sounds good. Thank you.
I don't know if I articulated that correctly, Katie, but I think that was the intent of that.
I was also curious about those recommendations for to the physicians who would be making those recommendations or who would be following up with physicians.
Physicians, you mean like which type of physicians?
Maybe you're referring to the Mortality Review Committee, perhaps?
Correct. Yes.
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
So are you asking, Bev, if there's information that's needed from a physician and the SC can't get it or the provider can't get it, who will be getting that from the physician? Is that what you're asking?
That, and sometimes maybe the review committee decided that they maybe needed more education or something. I mean, we take people to medical appointments and we support them medically, but we don't write the orders or doctor's orders or schedule to come and see people again. So that's what, if there's physician recommendations from the Mortality Review Committee, will the state be following up on those?
I think some of that will parlay into that root cause analysis, looking at where some of the barriers, and then trying to work with probably a local task team to take a look at how to impact some of that. And I think there's a larger plan to parlay that into trying to find out more of the barriers around that. If there's recommendations on the medical management around that for follow-up with physicians, I would leave that to DDD to decide if they're going to pursue that with physicians.
Hey everybody, this is Tony. So to help clarify, Bev, those recommendations that would come back, if it was something specific to medical care, the ISP, whoever has been identified, which generally is the residential provider, we would be looking to them then to take action on those recommendations. If it's something around, we recommend staff receive increased training on G-tube feedings, then we would be looking to you to increase that staff training. But if it's a larger recommendation that the division or the system should be doing something, then it's obviously the state. So I see it as kind of, they're partnership recommendations, if you will, of how the system will improve. Some will be the state, some will be the providers.
I have one other question, just it's on the related piece, the critical incidents piece that's critical incident management piece that's going to be coming into place in March. Are you talking in critical incidents the way we talk critical incidents? You're talking about high GER kind of things?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, so I know I have some questions about some practices that have been changing somewhat recently, and I don't know if this is a place in the presentation to talk about those things, or if we will have an opportunity later. We can pass that work later in this presentation if we can talk about some of those questions.
Sure. I think as soon as we're done with the Liberty discussion, I think it's open discussion. So maybe we'll let Liberty finish, and then we can certainly go back to that if that's okay, Karen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions for Liberty?
This is Brian Canner, and I guess I'm curious as to if the recommendations are able to be, if feedback can be given on the recommendations. And the reason that I ask is just from a liability standpoint. You know, it's one thing to say that hindsight 2020 or moving forward, we would recommend you do this as best practice. That's not the same as saying that you were at fault and caused potentially an unexpected death. And it can be twisted by a liability attorney or somebody wanting to bring suit. And so I'm just concerned about anything that would be documented as a recommendation. And this is without seeing any of these recommendations. I guess the question is, are we able to get feedback?
Yeah, I mean, any feedback related to any letter that would be issued, you can definitely contact Liberty and follow up if there's any question or clarification or any further documentation needed around that. That's absolutely possible and welcome, because this is a new process for everyone.
Okay.
And I think the way it would be termed is, you know, just recommendation to align with best practice, as opposed to here's a recommendation where, you know, in terms of how people traditionally mean that for citation.
Thank you.
All right, well, we thank you guys for your time. And again, we know this is new, so if you have any follow-up questions or things you think of after the presentation you want clarified, I believe some of this information will be posted on the website, and we did include a slide with our contact information. Email is the easiest way to get a hold of us. So if you email that nebraska.quality.health, we're happy to triage any answers that we can or help get those in partnership with DDD.
You can also direct questions. Sorry, this is Katie Widener. You can also direct questions to me as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think now is the wonderful time for open discussion, and I'm going to take the PowerPoint down so perhaps we could see more folks. If I can do this here. All right, so I did see a couple comments in the chat that I just wanted to go back to really quickly. When we were talking earlier about referrals and conversations that folks are having when participants are looking for a new provider, there was a comment in here, if we could please see if providers could make sure to respond to the referral as quickly as you can. Again, I know you guys are juggling a billion things just like our staff are. But it just does kind of hold up the process. If you're unable to support the person, please go ahead and decline. But if you could get our responses to us and to let folks know, that would be great. If we are not responding to a question that you have and additional information that you need, please do make sure to let us know so that we're being timely in our response as well to you. Thank you, Lene, very much for putting the contact information in for the division. That's very helpful. We did also get a question regarding an update on the developmental index. And so we have spoken before in previous provider meetings about some upcoming changes about potentially moving away from our developmental index as our level of care and utilizing a different tool. And so it's my understanding very recently that we are going to pause on that right now. And so we will be continuing to use our developmental index as our level of care for right now. I think the division is working on what will be that next tool that will be using, but initially we had thought that this fall time we'd be starting to pilot a form and piloting a new process, but it's my understanding that that's all on pause right now. So I just wanted to let folks know that. And those were all, I think, the questions that I had worked through or saw. I think I just saw a couple coming in while I was talking, but are there other questions that folks have? Feel free to unmute.
This is Karen. I had alluded to the fact that I did have some questions.
Yep.
A couple things have come up lately. One, we are sometimes having critical incidents occur, and service coordinators are contacting us the same day, within hours, or possibly the next day, asking for where we are with our investigation. They are sometimes going out to a site and talking with people before we're being able to even initiate our own investigation. And that is a little bit troublesome. I wondered where that's coming from.
Thank you very much, Karen, for bringing this back up. And somebody who knows this process better can certainly feel free to chime in. I know we certainly, from a service coordination standpoint, when there's any issue or concern, especially an allegation of abuse and neglect, we want to be respectful to the process, the investigation from either law enforcement, adult protective services, or even your own agency. But we do ask our staff to go out and at least, or have a conversation to make sure the person's doing okay. And if it is a sensitive topic where something shouldn't be discussed, that we might maybe encourage them to just go out and say, hey, I was in the neighborhood, just checking on to see how you're doing, and really not bring up the allegation or concern. But again, we want to ensure that the person is doing okay, and we've kind of checked in on that way. If you're finding specific situations where perhaps we didn't sort of use that laissez-faire approach, and we're really getting into details that we shouldn't, do let us know those specific situations. We can follow up directly. It is always hard, as you know, to kind of we can remind people, but with those specifics, we can actually really make sure to address it with the staff that we're having some struggles with. I also know that we are working on ensuring that we're getting resolution with those critical incidences. And I know that there is a very long standard operating procedure that we have, and I am not an expert in that. And our staff are certainly trying to follow up and ensuring that we're completing that. And so I'm not sure if some of that push is coming from that. Anybody that knows that process a bit better than I do, feel free to chime in and add some additional information.
Jillian, hi. Oh, I can turn on my...
Sure. Oh,
Hi.
hello, Sarah. I think I know that. Yes.
Hello.
Thanks, Sarah.
So I did a lot of training with our supervisor teams, and also as I'm the person who's been working with all of you on the incident reporting expectations from the provider perspective. I also developed the SOP on our side of things. Our SOP doesn't require, well, there's some types of incidents that require a specific type of follow-up, but not every incident requires a face-to-face visit or things like that. So that is really driven by a discussion between the service coordination supervisor and the service coordinator about potential issues that they see and what potential timely follow-up may be necessary or appropriate. So, but we do not, it's in the SOP that your investigation or your incident follow-up on your end, that GER resolution, isn't expected to be completed for 14 calendar days from the submission of the original high GER. So if there's some confusion surrounding that, that's something that I think, like Jillian said, situationally, we can try to resolve any confusion around that on our side of things, if you let us know if that's occurring. And then, but as far as when they might be coming out to do face-to-face visits, that is something that the SOP does require for some types of incidents and is possible, might be assigned on a discretionary basis for other types of incidents, so that it just comes down to, like Jillian said, making sure that we're being respectful of your incident follow-up and making sure that when our staff are going out and having those contacts, whatever that may look like and whatever reason those are happening for, we're really focused on what the purpose of our follow-up is, which is to ensure everything is okay with the participant while your incident follow-up is ongoing.
Thank you, Sarah. And I had gotten a private message that it was kind of difficult to hear you. And so essentially, Sarah had just said that, you know, similar to what I had said earlier, that there is that conversation between the supervisor and the SC to determine whether or not that face-to-face visit to just check in on the person is needed and necessary. But then kind of reiterated, of course, we don't want to get into the middle of any investigation or impact your guys' investigation in any negative way. So do let us know if that specifically is coming up. We have all of our service coordination supervisors on here, and so I'm confident that they're taking notes, and these will be things that we'll talk about in our huddles coming up yet this week or next, to make sure that we can just kind of remind staff that if they are going out, when there is an investigation that will be done by our provider agency, they should treat it no different than if there's an investigation by law enforcement or adult protective services, that we just really don't get into the middle of any of those details, and that we still can see a person without asking those kind of specifics. So thank you for bringing up the question, Karen, and thanks for the additional information, Sarah. Did that answer your question, Karen?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. So it's more of what I would consider like a wellness check. Just a, yep, that's cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we just like you guys, we certainly care about the folks that we're working with, and we've worked with some folks for a really long time. And although it's coming through and you have to do your investigation, and maybe, you know, in some cases, we know something, we all know something happened, but we're trying to investigate what happened or with whom, right? We want to go out and see folks and just make sure everybody's still doing okay. So, yeah.
And I will, while we're on the topic of incident reporting, we do have our agency provider, the monthly ongoing training and Q&A sessions that I've been holding for the last several months. That is scheduled for tomorrow from 1:30 to 3:30 for anybody who has questions about incident reporting or anything that's come up recently, or if anybody has questions about kind of the role that our service coordinators and supervisors have within the division. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to expand upon that and answer any questions anybody has in more detail in that session tomorrow. And if you guys, if anybody don't have the WebEx details for that and want to listen in, you can email me and I will share that information with you.
Thank you, Sarah.
I have a question. This is Alfredo at Home at Last.
Yeah, hi.
So we had a couple GERs that we submitted, and there were two particular ones that were undetermined, yet we got a phone call from a service coordinator asking us to report one of the two cases to APS based on the undetermined classification. Are we missing anything that undetermined should be reported to APS automatically, or was that a particular case?
Well, that's a great question, Alfredo. And without knowing any of the specifics, I think it would be kind of difficult for me to answer. I mean, of course, we're all bound by the same responsibility to report any allegation or concern of abuse, neglect, or exploitation to adult protective services. So, without knowing that specific scenario, I think it'd be really hard. We haven't recently done any new training that says these 5 exact things you need to make sure. There's nothing new, I guess, that we're asking staff to make sure to report. So if you want to share that specific situation, you can certainly reach out to the SDA or to myself, and I'm happy to process that one with you. But I think it would be difficult for me to answer that without not knowing the specifics.
Great. I just wanted to make sure, in general, we don't have to report underneath to APS automatically. That's all.
Well, we should all, I think you are required, right, to report any situation within your agency that there is a concern of abuse, neglect, or exploitation to APS, right?
That's a separate question. I'm talking about
Alfredo?
undetermined classification.
Oh,
Alfredo,
then I'm not following. I'm sorry.
Are you talking about incidents or injuries of unknown origin?
Yeah.
Okay. So injuries of unknown origin, unless they raise suspicion of abuse or neglect, are not reportable. And if an injury of unknown origin doesn't raise suspicion of abuse or neglect based on the circumstances, the nature of the injury, etc., then it does not need, there's no requirement that it is reported to APS. It is possible, though, if your agency maybe completed a lower or medium GER, that the SC looked at it and saw something about the circumstances that made them concerned, that it could raise suspicion of abuse and neglect. So like Jillian said, without knowing all of the details, that's just something that springs to mind that might explain what went on there. But to answer your question in general, if an injury of unknown origin does not have something about it that raises suspicion of abuse and neglect, then it is not reportable in a high GR, and it is not something that is required to be reported to APS.
Thank you.
I think the issue with that is, so I change hundreds of GRs per month. Anyway, if you mark undetermined, because staff will put, they found a scratch, so put undetermined, because they don't know how it happened, well, that makes it an automatic high. So you have to go in and change it because you're marking undetermined. And so if you don't catch that, it's automatically high.
Well, it was a legitimate situation. It was a scratch file, undetermined. It was put in as a high time. And then we got a call asking to report it to APS. I just wanted to make sure that undetermined scratches are not all reported to APS, should they be. You've answered the question. It does not unless there's some suspicion. So I'm good with the answer.
Okay, I will say if it was put in a high GER and it didn't meet any other criteria to be considered a high GER, that might be what the service coordinator may have, or SCS, I can't remember what you said. If you put it in a high GER, then they may have assumed that it did arouse suspicion of abuse and neglect, because an injury of unknown origin isn't necessarily reportable in a high GER if it does not raise suspicion of abuse or neglect. But I'm happy to talk. If this answered your question, great. If you'd like to talk more about it, I'm happy to talk with you after this too. If you have questions, or if you want to tune into the session tomorrow, I'm always happy to cover this in detail in that session that's focused on incident reporting requirements.
I'm very comfortable with response. I'm good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have just a couple of quick things. One is, I recognize there's been a lot of kind of turnover the last year and a half with service coordination, but if there could be some type of kind of procedure put into place when a new SC comes on, or when one goes away, because we've had more than a couple instances where an SC quit and we didn't even know it, and then later on we ended up getting an email, but it was a ways after finding out that someone else is taking over. So I don't know if there's anything officially that exists.
There is. Thank you for sharing that with us, Nicholas. Service coordination should be making sure that providers and families are aware when there is a staff change. It might take them a few days if it's an unexpected change, right, to get that out. But there should absolutely, we used to old school mail letters out, but now it should be in an email communication or a phone call, letting them know that the current service coordinator is leaving and who their coverage service coordinator is. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. If that's not occurring, again, we have all of our great leaders on here. Please remind your staff and remind yourselves that that is a practice that we want to keep doing because we do want to make sure we're being transparent with families. So thanks for letting us know that.
And then my other question was just, what was the reasoning behind making the ICAPs biannual? It just seems like, and maybe I'm on an island with this, but it seems like a pretty high frequency. I mean, every other year, it seems like it's happening very quickly.
So I can certainly take a great stab at this. If there's another leader on here who would like to take it, they certainly can. I'm hearing nobody speak up. Or Joni, do you happen? I know we had gotten some recommendations as a part of our rate rebase. And I think that was one of the recommendations that we should be more frequently conducting the ICAP, which is the, of course, tool that we all know determines our individual budget amount. But is there additional information that would be helpful for folks to know?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say, Jill, it was a recommendation from our consultants when we were looking at ICAPs just to better keep track of changes in people's skills and abilities and people who are aging, dementia, things like that. So.
I think thank you, Joni. Nicholas, I think to your point, it is cumbersome, right? It's a lot of, I know your guys' time, it's a lot of our staff's time to make sure that we're doing that, but it does give us the ability on a more regular basis to assess the participant to see if a different level of funding is needed to support them. But I don't know if you have other questions or concerns around that.
I think if anything, at least from my perspective on the provider side, and maybe again, it's just me, I just kind of feel like we're on our heels a lot that we're going to see funding changes. And just for the sake of, trying to provide a high quality of care,
Sure.
Being concerned that we only have like 2 years where we're guaranteed this level of funding. And just because sometimes it seems that, it's not a circumstance where maybe all the questions are understood depending on who's answering them. It feels like we're on our heels a lot.
Sure. Thank you. Another question that we had gotten in the chat, or maybe it was just sent to me, and I think it might kind of go on the topic too of Nicholas, your first point that you had on there, but I'll make sure I get the phone list out to folks. I usually send them out or attach them to the invite of our current phone numbers for our service coordinators and supervisors, and they've been updated. I just haven't had a second to get them into a PDF. So when I do that, I'll get it attached to the agenda today, just so folks have, or to the meeting invite, so you guys have that current copy. But there was also a comment about referrals when we were talking about that earlier today. If we could please have service coordination discontinue those referrals that have been filled, that would also help providers get through those more quickly. So just a reminder to service coordination for that. Sarah, the scenario that you sent me, if that's okay, I'll just follow up with you outside of this and I can help answer that for you. And then on the topic of referrals, Jill had put in the comment in here, a different Jill, fabulous name there, by the way, a suggestion for service coordinators to put on the first line of the comments of what service they're looking for. And perhaps maybe this can help, again, speed along that process. As a particular issue when we're searching through a large list of referrals and we have multiple locations. And so thank you for that feedback. We can certainly do our best to try to accommodate that. Were you going to say something, Jill?
Yeah, I was going to. So not only the service that they're seeking, like if it's vocational or SLP, but if they could say the location of where they're looking, because I searched the referrals for all of Region 5 services and, we're all over the place. And so it'd be really good to know where I send them.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the feedback and the suggestions. And again, service coordination can take it back to staff and we can do what we can. So thank you. Any way to make everything more efficient and streamlined for all of us, right? Other questions?
I have a question that doesn't relate to anything that we've talked about today, but I'm sure it relates that other providers can relate to it. And it's about missing data and being asked to go back weeks to fill in missing data. And I'm always a little bit confused about what that's supposed to look like.
Yeah, good question. Well, I think it would be perfect in real time or fairly immediate when we identify that there are holes in data to get that filled. But if it's not been noticed by the provider, hopefully doing your own internal checks or service coordination right away, I don't think anybody wants anyone to be dishonest and to make up stuff, right? But I do think we have a responsibility to reach out to the agency when we do identify that there are missing holes. We want to make sure that that doesn't, in an audit for ourselves down the road, that doesn't complicate things for having to look at recoupments or just, making sure that services were provided. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how far away people are going back or how far back people are asking folks to do that with, but I know we
from the previous service review.
Yeah. So when sorry, go ahead.
No, so that can be months.
Yeah, when we do our desk review for our quarterly service reviews, that desk review does look at specifically programming and data and making sure that things are being completed. And so I suppose if you're only running one program and you're missing lots of data, unless you want us to enter into discussions about, do we have to look at some issues with rates or payments or recoupments, then I think that's why service coordination is probably reaching out and just saying, hey, do you have this? But if it's a whole, we talk about this in training, if it's one day missing here or there, I mean, we're all human, right? Things happen. But if it's, I don't know if it's larger holes or if it's just a couple of days or not. But are you guys running audits yourself or so that we're not the ones notifying you to fill it in, that you're catching it and you guys are able to get it filled in?
Well, as you know, audits are not 100% either. So no, we don't always catch it. And I'm not saying that it's not worth pointing out, but I have been confounded a few times where they're insistent that you put something in and it's like,
okay,
I really don't understand what you want us to put in those situations. So I kind of get from your gist,
sure,
from what you've said, what the expectation is, but I think there might be a little overzealousness in expecting the response that they won't accept when you say, you caught me.
Okay. Well, and so I appreciate the discussion and we can certainly take it back internally to see if there are those scenarios. And I think about examples where maybe other programs were being ran, right? And so it's not an issue of recoupment.
Right.
Do we really want you to go in and just make something up? No, we don't. We don't want inaccurate data. And I appreciate the provider's transparency and wanting to be honest. But we can certainly take it back and talk internally about if there's a better way or a better practice to have that then documented.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Other questions?
I haven't. Their question that's also not been on the topic. HCI definition is 100% of it non-residential or 50% of it non-residential?
So it's my understanding that our habilitative community inclusion is just the majority of the time out in the community. And so if there is the start of the day residentially, right, to just gather supplies, kind of work out what you're going to do or going back for a meal or whatever, that there isn't any issue or concern with that, but the majority of services should be out in the community. I think we took out the 50% and the 40% and all that. Or it's going to be taken out in one of our next waiver amendments. I'm not sure which draft my brain is thinking of right now, but did I answer your question, Bev? Are you getting from staff that none of it can be done residentially, or? With
That's
Appendix
what,
K,
at one time, it used to say it cannot be residential. It was non-residential. And even at then, 51% had to be in the community from a workshop. And so did that definition change that 49% can be at home and 51% in the community, and you can bill for HCI? That's my
yeah,
question.
I think I'd have to have, I don't have the definition in front of me, but I do believe it can start or end, or a piece of it can occur in the residence. It's just that the whole service shouldn't be provided. And I think obviously with Appendix K, that was a little bit different, right? People had those flexibilities. It was covered within Appendix K. But what we don't want to see is that people in group homes or shared living situations are, you know, home all day or all evening, you know, in their residence, but then also the majority of their day, when the intent of that service code is to be integrated into the community. And so I think there are times where it might be appropriate to go back, but the whole day shouldn't be at home, or just a tiny piece of it, if that makes sense. If you have specific situations where maybe due to weather or a person in their needs, I mean, I would staff those with the supervisor, or, you know, pull in the SDA if you need to, if maybe you're feeling like the team isn't coming to an agreement of what would be suitable within the service code. I don't know if anybody from policy is on, if you would prefer to add to my answer. Other questions? Well, I don't think we have any other agenda topics for you guys. I hope we've caught everything. I think I've seen a couple notes in here, but I think it's more just clarifications to other things. So if you've put something in and we've missed it, you know, please let us know. Hopefully we've caught everything, but we certainly appreciate everybody's time today. On behalf of the division, we're very thankful for our great partnership with our providers. These are tough times. We're feeling it within our own division as well, with some staffing issues, and I know you guys are certainly as well. And so to make time to make sure that we're all on the same page and keep our communication close, we really do appreciate it. So thank you everybody for attending.
Hey, Jillian?
Yeah.
Jillian?
Yes.
I don't know.
I would like to
Yes.
ask a question about the developmental index. I had,
Sure.
yeah. Thank you for letting us know that we are using the current one. But I wanted some consistency. We're starting to get some additional feedback that there needs to be more information in the DI, that if they are not independent, we're to elaborate in every comment section. Now, is this something that was maybe being talked about by the state when going to implement a revised DI, or is that something that is on our current index?
Yeah, so I think even though we knew that we were looking to utilize a new process for our level of care, following that recommendation from one of our contractors, we still did want to make sure that in the meantime, the level of cares, the developmental indexes that were completed were being done consistently and correctly. And we continued to get a lot of questions from providers across the state at sort of just what each section was looking for and kind of interpretations. And so we did work as a division to create some tips and tricks. And that was really vetted through our policy team, through our eligibility enrollment team, from service coordination, to make sure that it was capturing everything that we needed that level of care to capture. And I know that the service coordination supervisors or SDAs, you know, have shared that when folks have asked. It's not posted on our public website, but it is something that we can certainly send to you so that you have that same information as well. We want to be as transparent so we can all fill it out correctly. So have you seen that document, Monica?
Yeah, the one that I received, that's what kind of got me confused, because the one I received is not the same document.
So
Jillian,
So
I might be able to speak to this just a little bit.
Lene. Yeah.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm Lene Johannes, the District 1 Service Administrator. Monica, I think that maybe we may be talking about the tips and tricks training form that we utilize when we're teaching any of the service coordinators how to really describe how to answer some of the questions or elaborate, because the idea on the developmental index is to have as much information to help that person as possible. And so one of the things I know, like on mobility, we talk a lot about that needing assistance for ambulation. Well, it's not necessarily that we need a diagnosis, but we need some way or what are the needs of that person and how is the team addressing maybe that ambulation need. So they may have a fall risk, so we may have a fall protocol or a safety plan in place. So really the idea there is it's not necessarily in that mobility that there's a diagnosis needed, but there's some other needs that have been identified that we should describe. What other things would we be seeing that that person needs? Things like when we have to elaborate. So if somebody just has a marked, or they're close to independence but not quite there, so they need partial assistance in an area, well, what does that look like for them? And that's what we're talking about in that comment section of just elaborating of what are the specific things that we're looking at in this area. Maybe it's just one verbal prompt, but that's still some assistance needed.
Right.
I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of what we're looking for, is we really want as much information as possible to assist.
Yeah, that I'm glad you brought up the mobility part. So like, for example, we have a woman who just needs help time to time to step on and off a curb. So if we just put in there that she's fine with the stairs and the, everything else that's in that sentence, except for the curbs, we would just clarify. But that was one thing that was tripping us up, is that we were asked, well, what's the diagnosis? And we're like, there isn't a diagnosis. I don't know.
It's really about that need, not necessarily a diagnosis. So what would the staff be doing to support her when a curb comes up? They would probably be standing right there, be able to offer their hand if she would need assistance, or at least monitor her anytime that she was walking up on a curb. That's what we would describe in there.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Lene, I don't know if it helps, but Monica, this is, we get a lot of feedback from our eligibility team on these, and that's really where that mobility one has come from, that there should be a condition, or just to really capture that need in the comments. And so not necessarily a diagnosis, there could be a condition, but to really capture what it is so we can give the rationale, because that's a lot of the feedback we get when they're doing our reviews.
Yes. And if I could just interject too, in completing the ICAPs, we rely heavily on information in that developmental index as well. So Lene is correct. As many comments or additional information that you can add, it helps us interpret the needs of the person on the developmental index as well. Like there is the question about writes name and fills out application forms. You may check that because they can write their name, but you may want to put a comment that they can write their name only. They can't also fill out application forms. Otherwise, we're going to assume that they're writing their name and filling out application forms. So
I'm glad you brought that up, Joni, because if I was filling out the document and it says able to write name and application, I wouldn't check it. And then I put in the comments section what they could do, because there are quite a few, or I shouldn't say there are a few statements that ask for two totally different skills, like fantasy or realistic and unrealistic versus appropriate and inappropriate. Well, they might be able to do one but not the other. So what is your rule of thumb?
Monica,
what's the state's rule of thumb on that?
You are correct on that. They actually changed it, Joni, to where you're not supposed to just cross stuff out in there. So if they can't do all of it, you don't check it, and then you just write comments down below. We will get feedback from the eligibility specialists if we mark that one.
Okay, good to know. Yeah,
All
but
right.
yeah, some of them do have two totally different behaviors, and it's important that you don't check independent if they are receiving prompts to do that, or if staff are telling them that they need to do that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up too, Joni. That's another thing. The current one that we're using, it'll say independent, comma, may require prompts and cues. Well, in my mind, if you require prompts and cues, you're not independent. And there's been some cases that none of the listed items apply to that customer, but we're being told in some situations that, well, you need to check the one that's most appropriate, that one box has to be checked. You have to check one that is most appropriate, and that doesn't seem logical either.
And maybe, Monica, we could certainly reach out to you. I mean, if there's some additional support that we could provide. I mean, I really appreciate everybody's discussion and chiming in, because I think that's what these meetings are for, right? Just so we can be on the same page and help support each other. But maybe we could certainly figure out who would be the best subject matter expert, can have a conversation with you. And then if there's things that we aren't, because I feel like that was also a theme thing that came up earlier, if there's things that we aren't doing consistently across the state, because many of you providers support people across different districts, you know, we want to make sure that we know that too. So we are, what you can expect for your staff doing in Kearney isn't any different than in Omaha or in Lincoln or any other area. So. Did you have other specific questions, Monica, on that?
Nope. You answered it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Thanks, teammates, for jumping in and helping.
Jill, can I have one more question?
Sure. I think we could just call this the Bev and Karen and Monica
Actually,
show right
if,
along with the division. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing.
If Tony was still on, I know he said that they use the division submitted to CMS, FMAP. I'm not sure what the correct name of it was on July 12th. And so I was wondering if you heard back from CMS and or if we can get a copy of what was submitted.
Very good question. We did submit our HCBS spending plan. So that's the money, the 10% ARPA funds that are available to states for home and community-based services. We are actually right now working on crafting the message that will be with that spending plan that's going to be posted to both the Medicaid and the DD website. So it should be posted here shortly. Many of you are subscribed to the page. If not, you should subscribe to the page. You'll get an email alert once that gets posted to the page, but we're in process of getting it posted right now. But it has not been approved. So we will, and there is a statement on the posting that just says this is a draft plan. It's subject to approval from CMS, and a reminder that it is a plan that it's kind of a working document. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Green. And I was really kidding, Bev and Monica and Karen. We do really appreciate that you're comfortable unmuting and asking and having the dialogue with us. So thanks.
I'm not asking another question.
Are you sure? Last call for questions.
Thank you guys for all you do at the state. We really appreciate your support. At least my agency does.
Yeah, thanks, Alfredo. Thank you guys as well for your time today. Like I said in the beginning, we will post this so that if you really want to have some of your other teammates and your provider listen in, something that would be helpful, you're welcome to direct them to that link. We'll get it posted here, probably give us a week or so. I think it has to go through communications, but we'll get it on there. So thanks again for everyone's time. Take care and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you.